Okay, I have started the recording. Again, thank you all for coming to tonight's panel. Like I mentioned, we offer three specializations for our full-time and our advanced standing MSW program. Like I mentioned, that includes administration and policy practice, community-centered integrated practice, and clinical social work. Just to kind of give you some keywords or kind of words to kind of highlight your attention to what that kind of entails or what that means. For administration and policy practice, we're thinking about that being focused on organizational leadership, policy design and analysis, advocacy, and that systems level change. For community-centered integrated practice, we're thinking about community-engaged work, systems transformation, strategies for equity, liberation, and community-rooted leadership. And for that clinical social work specialization, we're focused on assessment, diagnosis, therapy, and direct practice across behavioral health, medical school, and community settings. It is important to know, however, that the purpose of these specializations is to kind of help you explore a practice setting in which you'd like more structured support. So it's not meant to like narrow your career outcomes or your career trajectory. With the social work field, it's really common for clinical practitioners to influence policy, for administrators to lead community engagement initiatives, and for community organizers to do clinical social work. Now that I've kind of given that kind of basic kind of framework there, I'd like to go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. We have Shyla Reed here, who is representing APP or Administration and Policy Practice. Allison, who is representing our Clinical Social Work Specialization, and Faith here to represent Community-Centered Integrative Practice. So feel free to say hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you all are here. I'm Shyla, I she, her pronouns, and yeah, I'm in the Administration and Policy Practice Specialization, or APP for short. I'm in the Advanced Standing program, so that means I have a bachelor's in social work, which allowed me to get my master's degree in 1 year. So it's my first and last year here in the master program. And my practicum site is for State Senator Tina Orwell, who has a Master of Social Work from UW. She started her career as a clinician and is now a state senator. And I'll pass it to Faith.
Hi, everyone. I am Faith. I use she, her pronouns. I am in the CCIP, Community Centered Integrative Practice Specialization. I'm also an advanced standing student, so one and done. So I have my BSW in social work as well. And my practicum site is at sorry, my brain's just loading. I didn't know I was going to see so many people here, but my practicum site is for the Youth and Young Adult Housing Response Team through DCYF. So we are a statewide team that just tries to get youth that are exiting publicly funded systems of care, and we're trying to get them safe and stable housing. I'll pass it over to Allison.
I actually can't hear any of you right now. Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
That
Allison.
is so weird. Let me leave and then come right back.
Okay,
I'm
no
so sorry about
worries.
this.
Yeah, no problem. In the meantime, um, for folks that are tuning in, just because the chat can be kind of hard to manage, we just ask that if you have any questions now or during the panel, please use the Q&A button to submit your questions. We have a handful of pre-prepared questions that we'll go through first, and then we'll go to live questions. So again, please use that Q&A function. And in your question, if you have a question that's meant for one specific panelist, please just go ahead and specify that in parentheses or at the beginning of the message so I know who to direct the question to. All right. And while we are waiting for Allison.
I have entered the room.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, I'll go ahead and repin you up here. Oh, oopsies. It's disappeared from my view. Oh
So
no.
thank you all for bearing with me through that. Everything was fine, and all of a sudden it wasn't, but we're all good. My name is Alison Marin. You can call me Allison. My pronouns are they, them. In Spanish, cualquiera is fine. I am a second-year full-time day student in the clinical track, and my practicum this year is at Consejo Counseling and Referral Services.
Welcome. Yes. And again, everyone, if you have questions now or during the panel, please use the Q&A function to submit those, and we will get to those after the handful of pre-prepared questions. All right, to start us off, because some of the folks that are tuning in maybe don't come from social work backgrounds, maybe they're not too familiar with the field. The first question that we have is, how would you describe your specialization to someone who doesn't come from that social work background? Starting off with Shyla.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to put the question in the chat too, if anyone's a visual person like me. Um, I would describe macro social work or the administration and policy practice specialization. It's a way to, social work is rooted in systems work. So whether you're a systems social worker or not, your framework is still going to be rooted in systems that, and mitigating those, whether it's at the CCIP level, at a clinical level, or at a policy level. And I think in the macro specialization specifically, you're going to learn about how systems impact communities, how they perpetuate systems of racism, of sexism, of homophobia, of transphobia, of any discriminations, of classism. There's all these systems that are socially and societally set up and then perpetrated at the government level and then also at a societal level. And you're going to learn how to navigate policies to better serve the communities that you're representing. So if these are policy issues and if these are and come from government entities, which there's a lot of arguments about where these come from. Is it only the government? That's we could talk for hours about that. But you're going to learn how to change systems that bring the community in. My goal too in policy work is how can I make systems level work, policy work more accessible to people from diverse backgrounds, from different populations with different identities. It's kind of like public policy, but with a strong social justice and equity lens. Like a lot of the curriculum is not just how to write a bill. Like it's like you'll learn techniques and strategies about writing and administration and political stuff, but you're going to learn how to analyze policy with a social justice lens, who's in the room, who's not in the room, and who could be in the room. What can we do to bring them here? Even you as a social worker with this lens, what do you know? What do you not know and need to know to be as informed as possible when you're making these big level decisions? So for me at my practicum, it's at the state level. Obviously, I'm not a senator, so I'm not like specifically voting on a bill, but a lot of the work that I do for my senator, I have influence on her. And so you're learning about how can I do this in the most equitable way from the inside. That's kind of, that was a long-winded answer, but that's how I like to describe administration and policy, how public policy works, but also how can I do this from a social justice lens from the inside of this system? And I'll pass it to Faith.
Okay, so the way I would describe CCIP is the blending of all macro, micro, and meso. I think this is no hate to anyone, to any specialization that you choose, but I chose it because I deeply think it's like the heart of social work. Like you need to, in order to make change in a community, you need to go to an individual. In order to make change in a policy level, you need to go to the community and to the individual. And in order, I think my kid's eating right next to me, but I think the biggest form of like beautiful resistance to a lot of the scary things that are going on right now is forming deep connections in community and learning how to bridge across differences, bridge across like disagreements and all of that. So I that's really the core of what we learn right now in our cohort. We're just doing a lot of like self-work and learning how we bring ourselves into the work, learning how other people's situations can affect us, and learning how we can like best bring forth love, change, and justice with through all of that. So yeah, and Allison.
So, with clinical, I would describe it as it's working one on one with people, but focusing on their mental health with case management, care coordination, and therapy skills. Clinical work involves a lot of assessment and treatment planning, working with any combination of individuals, groups, and families across all ages. You learn a lot about what impacts a person at the individual level, focusing on their basic and immediate needs.
Thank you all for sharing. Like you guys were all kind of talking about, all of the work kind of comes back to that social justice kind of lens and that focus at the heart of things. And thank you for highlighting kind of how that might look differently, like Shyla mentioned, with the more like policy and like the drafting like brief side of things, whereas Allison was talking about like case management, right? Kind of related to that, in terms of, how we talk about these specializations and people's understandings of them. What are maybe some misconceptions that people might have around your specialization?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think for administration and policy, kind of like what I was touching on a minute ago, this specialization is not solely focused on like how to draft a bill, how to pass it, how to write a policy memo. You're going to get those skills too, but it's how to do that with a social justice lens and incorporate a lot of different skills and your social work knowledge. So that's one misconception. I would say the other one that I've kind of recently been grappling with, and it's one that I actually had coming into policy. I was really worried, especially like policy work in politics. Not all policy work is necessarily like in the heart of a government or like for a politician. Um, in my experience, a misconception I've had was that policy work was going to be really out of touch with communities. I was worried that like my practicum is right now is in the Capitol, so it's in Olympia. It's in, very pretty fancy building and everybody wears a suit. And I was worried that that would just feel really out of touch. And I'm not going to lie, like in some ways it definitely can. It's a weird power dynamic when you're meeting with constituents of someone, yeah, in the fancy building in the suit, working for the fancy politician or whatever. And you're meeting with real people and constituents there to talk about concerns and that impact their lives. But I would also say like in a lot of ways it doesn't feel out of touch. It feels very much inundating and I'm trying to think of the word, like very much in social work and in policy in a different way than clinical social work does. Like I'll have 15-minute meetings with constituents about issues on behalf of my senator. And we're talking about like in that 15-minute conversation about, for example, I met with a group about wanting slightly lower standards for kids who are in abusive homes to be removed from the family. Like at what point, this is a controversial topic in social work, like at what point do you move a kid from their family if they're in an abusive situation? Oftentimes it's better to keep a kid in their family, but also you don't want to like perpetuate, keep them in an abusive system or cycle. It was a 15-minute conversation, but it was really heavy and we were all kind of crying at the end of it. So it's inundating and it's really involved in social work and high pressure, and you do interact one-on-one a lot with people still in some cases. It's just in a different way than maybe casework or community or CCIP meso level social work would be. It's a weird power dynamic, and I take it very seriously in the sense that it's my job to convey to the senator I work for exactly what this issue is, in like in the way that represents the organization I met with, not that represents my views, but also take it seriously in how I portray that information, how I receive it, how I write it up, with being conscious of my biases and when I'm explaining these to other people who may be able to influence that policy. So I think that's another misconception, is that it's really removed because in some ways you can argue that it is, but in a lot of ways it's not. You are very much involved and sometimes have very little time to make a big decision, and like legislative sessions sometimes are only a couple months long, and those decisions made have impacts for years on people's livelihood, and ability to access resources. All right, I'll pass it to Faith and Luca.
Okay, so I'm not really sure about what people assume about CCIP, but I would assume that people are thinking like, oh, I don't know if there's like necessarily a focus to this specialization, if it's just about community or yeah. So again, I don't really know about the misconceptions, but I can say that like the classes we're doing now are intergroup dialogue and national practice, globalization and national practice. And so it like will span to like specifically talking to people individually, but also how as a community in this country can we expand to the world and further that community as well. So hold on, Luca. Sorry. But yeah, so I mean I don't know about the misconceptions, but I can say that like a lot of the time we are focused on being very, very intentional about what we bring to our practice and how we can use our interpersonal relationship to create change in legislation.
A common misconception in clinical work, or for people who pursue clinical work for therapy, is that you need to know everything in order to be a good therapist or clinician, and that you'll learn everything by the book and through class material. What's actually true is that therapy and clinical skills are built over time, and a good therapist is one that never stops trying and never stops learning, and that most of your learning will come from direct work and practice. So choose a practicum that aligns with what you want to learn.
Yes, that's super important to highlight for folks. And kind of something that Faith also touched on is how, again, regardless of like the specialization that a student chooses to pursue, right? There's still that crossover, right? It's the varying levels of practice and the varying scopes, but there's still that crossover. It's still very interdisciplinary. Um, Something else that I think folks would be super interested in knowing about, especially because a lot of the people that are here tonight recently applied for the MSW program or are considering pursuing it in the future, is, how did you go about choosing what your specialization would be? When you came into the program, did you already know what you wanted? How did your understanding of that specialization change over time? So if you could kind of share some of your like personal experiences, coming into the program and where you are today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I always knew, like I did my bachelor's in social work. I took a 4-year gap in between, so I did it a while ago. And I always knew that I was more oriented towards like the bigger picture, like macro social work. I think I always, for better or for worse, like it's not better or worse than anybody else's, but I'm trying to get to just like the root of the problem. Like, how can I prevent something from happening in the most effective way? I was also kind of been considering how can I do that based on what my personal strengths are, my skills and my interests. Um, I always joke that I'm doing a public service by not being a clinician because I would be terrible at it based on my strengths. Like, it's a big know yourself thing, but also again, like Sarah mentioned at the beginning, like you're not pigeonholing yourself by specializing in an area of social work either. But for me, I am a strong writer, and I always have to take something back to the fundamentals. So I think policy work was really what called to me because of that. Since being in the specialization, I think I've just learned a lot about I'm trying to decide like where I can make the most impact after school. Like would it be as a legislator? Like should I be an elected official? Should I be a policy writer or analyst? And should I do that at the government level or at the nonprofit level? Should I be a lobbyist? I've been kind of trying, should I work at a nonprofit and do the admin sides? Because the other half, there's policy in this macro social work, and then there's administration. So like organizational structure and foundations. Would I be best at that? Trying to think of where I can have the most change, and I'm still figuring that out. That's evolving every day. I think right now I'm really interested in writing policy and proposing it either in a lobbyist fashion, like working on an issue topic and really getting to dive deep into this issue and try to get support from all sorts of folks, and proposing that to legislator. I think that's kind of the direction I'm going in. Just based on, yeah, trying to find that root or issue wise, that root feels really like economic justice right now. Cause I think when people have, their when they can afford to have their basic needs met because we live in a capitalist society, um, that can be preventative of a lot of different other things that may occur. So trying to find that root is kind of the way I've gone about this. Yeah, but that's changed again, like I said, that's changing every day. And if you ask me in 6 months, it could be a little bit different.
So I chose CCIP because well, in my undergrad, I fell in love with a policy class, and I loved that. Well, I just found it mind blowing that like the injustices were like written down, that it was like actually like in writing the things that are going on in this world. That it's like it's not hidden. But then I also am coming from a teacher background, so I used to be a pre-K teacher and a preschool teacher and worked at childcare centers, and I saw if I wanted to actually serve a kid to the best of my ability and capacity, I needed to connect with their family. I needed to connect with the other big people in their lives. Um, so I just really felt when I read the description of CCIP how it kind of like spoke about the importance of the individual and the importance of like where that individual is operating and how our policies directly affect those communities. It really resonated with me, and I felt like there was no other choice. Like I was just like, oh, perfect, this is exactly what I want to do. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. I think that's it. All right, Allison, I'll hand it over to you.
Repeating back that question is, how did you go about choosing your specialization? How has your understanding of the specialization changed since entering the program? For me, it was personal. I always wanted to be a therapist, and clinical social work is the way, although my bachelor's is in psychology. For transparency, I'm also part of the Workforce Development Initiative, which covers some of the cost of an MSW in clinical social work students, and funding might influence your decision. My understanding entering this specialization is that I'd be learning about therapeutic modalities in class, and I really want to emphasize your learning for modalities will come from practicum, especially when the UW classes are competitive. Something to consider is representation. I think we need more bilingual therapists, and I am part of that small percentage.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing like your own personal stories. Something that really stuck out to me that Shyla said was thinking about where you want to make that impact, after you're done with your studies, and with Faith as well, talking about, you know, coming from that teacher background and seeing how it's affecting individuals and the communities that you really care about. And I think that's really awesome that you kind of felt like it was like a calling, like there was no other choice. It was definitely CCIP, which is great. And yes, I totally agree, Allison. More bilingual folks would be wonderful. Um, we will be getting into the live Q&A pretty soon. So again, folks, if you have any questions, please start submitting those in that FAQ portion of the Zoom. We have about two more pre-prepared questions. Our second to last one is, what are kind of like the main takeaways that you want prospective students to know? Yeah, to kind of just remember, when they're thinking about pursuing an MSW and which specialization that they want to choose.
This is an awesome question. The one thing I want prospective students to remember about policy social work is that policy and systems change is incremental. No one person is going to fix the system in one go, in one bill, in one meeting, in one email conversation, whatever it may be. And that's okay. The work is never done. I think it's always changing. And I think that sometimes can feel daunting and like discouraging, but it can also feel really empowering to know that even if something is really good, it can always be better. You know what I mean? So I think there can also be, and you can have an optimist lens there. And I think it's really key in policy work to balance being like dreaming and being realistic. They're both equally important. And I see my role as a policy social work to kind of bridge that gap between the dream ideal scenario, and where are we right now? And my goal is to kind of bridge that gap and get the reality part closer to the dream part. And as it gets closer, the dreams, now that we've gotten closer, the dream is you're going to dream bigger too, beyond that point. What could be next? And so that's kind of how I see policy work. So policy and systems change is incremental. Like I said, you're not going to get everything done in one bill, in one conversation, in one effort. And it's really important to be realistic about what's realistic right now in this political window, in this time, in this situation with the people I'm working with, and to always dream about what it could be. And your goal is to get it as close to there as possible, in logical, incremental steps.
Shyla, I love your brain. Okay. Something I really hope I'm like giving a good face to CCIP because I love it so much, and like we're in a cohort of like less than 30 people, and we really are so intentional with how we spend our time and how we interact with one another. And I just hope I'm doing all of the amazing folks in my cohort justice, because I mean, I think right now in this world, yes, this is what I want to say about CCIP. I think right now in this world, everything is so segregated. It needs to be black and white. It needs to be yes or no. It needs to be us or them. And I think something that's so, so special about CCIP is that, like,
Go potty.
okay, go ahead, go potty, is that we are genuinely taking intentional time and effort and space to say that no, we're not going to be a part of this, like, okay, I'll help you in just a second, about of this like like separative binary that like takes people away from each other and takes people away from helping one another and understanding and learning about one another. It truly is about like, you know, like doing the work is really sitting there and listening to someone that you don't have any similarities with, and but I see you, I hear you, and we're gonna get it done, and we're gonna serve you in any way possible that we can. So I think that's what CCIP is. So.
One thing I want prospective students to remember is that you're not limited to your specialization only. There are ways to engage in APP and CCIP work as a clinical student, and I really recommend being involved with the school, looking for opportunities within your practicum, and having great relationships with your APP and CCIP peers because social work is relational. If you identify as Latina and are looking for support, UW offers a Latinx traineeship that prepares Latina social workers regardless of specialization. Someone had privately messaged me if I speak Spanish. The answer is yes.
Awesome. I love that folks made that connection. And yes, kind of like Shyla and Faith were talking about, our students are all kind of working towards, affecting positive change. And, it's all, at different levels and at different scopes, right? From the individual to the individual, in communities and with, bigger populations as well. Um, our last and final prepared question before we head into the live questions is, if people are interested in learning more about maybe social work in general, about the specializations in general, or your specific specialization, what kind of resource would you point them to, or what would you kind of recommend that they engage with to learn more?
Yeah, I think personally, and this is because I'm a very like hands-on, tangible kind of person, is to get involved in some kind of policy admin relational work. So for me, what was really helpful, I didn't have a ton of experience before I applied. I had like done some political canvassing and texting. But after I applied, last year I got heavily involved as a volunteer on a local campaign. It was for like at the King County level. I was a volunteer, so not a staff, but I really threw myself in. I was like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll represent you at an event. I'll send these emails. Anything. And I have a really now like good relationship with that candidate. Like if I was to apply to a job for him, like he would know who I am, and if I saw him at Fire, we would say hi. Like you know what I mean? Like so, I made a lot of good connections, not just with the candidate, but with his team and people in that political sphere in local politics. So at the county and city levels, and that was really really huge in preparing me for my practicum now. You don't have to get involved in campaigns specifically. You could do advocacy days if there's an issue you're passionate about or an organization you're involved with. Right now is legislative session, so could you go to Olympia and advocate for a certain policy? Or it doesn't even have to be like at that level. You could if you're working at a nonprofit or in an organization, a system at your university, is there a change that you can advocate for within that organization, within that local system? Because that's also macro social work, right? It's fundamental. It's changing structures too. So if you're at your dub, if you're at a nonprofit organization, if you work for a certain department, is there structural change you can make there? Is there maybe if it's not your specific like job role, who can you talk to and who can you advocate to make that change? That a lot of people would really benefit from there. So getting involved in some kind of way will really help, I think, prepare you for the work you do ahead. Because also when you do that work, you'll make a lot of really good connections. In politics, especially, like if you just like shake someone's hand, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know this person. I love them." Like, I don't know anything about you. But like it doesn't have to be at that level, but making really good connections along the way can really help in the long run too. People want to help you, especially as a student. Like people want to uplift you, they want to connect. So whether it's with your professors, your peers, your coworkers, people that you're in the community with and volunteering with, whatever that may be, these could be your future colleagues. These could be people you advocate with and for in the future. These could be people that you don't agree with in the future, but need to negotiate and mitigate conversation with too. So making connections and getting involved now, whether it's campaigns, your structure, your organization, advocacy at the policy level, at the organizational level. Those are what I would recommend right now if you're interested in macro social work or in any kind of social work.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, one about like by the specialization, this is going to be really nerdy, but if you want to read anything by Paulo Freire or Bell Hooks, those are people that we read a lot of and is like the heart of a lot of what we do. And then hold on, I'll tell you after. Okay, I'll tell you soon. Again, sorry about that, but oh, this is gonna sound a little bit like metaphysical, but I really think like if you are really thinking about the specialization, like think about the people that you interact with, think about the community that they're in, and then think about the policies and the legislation that's affecting their community. And I think that's like a huge thing that we do. And specifically in my practicum, like we try to house youth and young adults that are exiting systems of care, like JR or a behavioral hospital or something like that. And we always say that we're youth centered, that we're not focusing on what went wrong, that we're focusing on their life, what has happened to them, and how we could like hone in on their verbalized needs and goals. And we're going to work with them and think about everything that has happened to their family, seeing what has happened to get them here, because usually it's a multi-generational thing, it's like a community-wide thing, and we need to like work with them and what they carry. So yes. CCIP.
One thing I would suggest for prospective students to explore is like just connect with people in the specialization. Learn about the different practicum placements people are in. Our experience in this track is on a spectrum, and you'll feel more knowledgeable about specializations when you know multiple perspectives. If you also know how to have a conversation with people, then you're already great and set for clinical social work.
All right. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to go ahead and move to the live question portion. Thank you all for submitting questions. I have the Q&A open. And again, I'm seeing some questions here in the chat. If you could just go ahead and put it in the Q&A, that way we can just kind of flag them and track them. It's a little bit easier for us. But okay, let me go ahead and get started. Just a fun little question to start us off with. Someone asked, if the panelists had to choose a different specialization, which would you choose?
Ooh,
Little quick fire
okay.
question there.
Probably CCIP. I love that it bridges like kind of the clinical and the macro, so you kind of get a taste of everything. So yeah, CCIP for me.
I don't want to switch, but if I had to, I'd probably do policy. Just because, like that's what's affecting people directly. So, yeah.
This is not me telling you not to do clinical. Please do clinical. But if I had to switch, I would also do CCIP. Only because I've noticed how with CCIP work, it seems like it's very much centering community and a relationship. And that's already something I'm trying to embody as a clinical student. But I imagine the conversations happening over there are much, much deeper.
All right. Love to see the love and support for our APP and CCIP. That's fabulous. Another quick question that someone had that's more of an admissions question. Someone asked about, when you choose a specialization, can you still take courses that fall under other specializations? Yes, you can. So for that MSW program, like I mentioned, for the full-time and advanced standing, you can choose any of those three specializations. When you apply to the program, you do indicate like what your first choice or what you want to pursue on the application, but you don't have to actually declare one until winter quarter, so that second quarter in the program. And yes, even when you're in a particular specialization, you can still take classes that don't fall under that specialization specifically. Another question. We have some questions that are kind of duplicate, so I might hop around a little bit. But let's see here. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Do-do-do-do-do. Allison, there was like quite a few questions about like the courses that fall under clinical. Can you talk about like some of the courses that you've taken, what you've liked about them, what have you learned through them?
So I'm a full-time day student, meaning that I have 2 years here in this program. The first year is really focused on kind of like getting everybody on the same page, since it's kind of like a generalization. You're taking a lot of like classes that are working with like individuals and groups in theory. You're also taking classes that engage in policy and research in theory. It's not until your second year that you kind of get a little more freedom, although I'm not quite there yet. My first quarter this year, where I've declared my specialization, was a little bit policy focused. And then this quarter, I'm also, because of the Latinx traineeship, I am taking another course that is technically an elective, but is required of that traineeship. And that one is specific with like engaging in social work practice with Latina populations, which has been so good and has been like filling the gap that I feel like I've been feeling in my work as a bilingual clinical student. And then next quarter, because of the way I've stacked my classes, I get all electives. With electives, the ones I'm thinking about like choosing and that are available is like interpersonal violence, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's like a somatic class, I believe. And I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm just not totally aware of, but that's essentially kind of like what you're looking like, if that answers the question.
Awesome. Thanks for highlighting some of those courses. And another question that was submitted, and it's a very commonly asked question, is, students that maybe want to go to the path of, they're interested in becoming like a therapist. Does it matter, or do they have to choose that clinical specialization? No, you can choose any of the specializations here for that MSW program and still seek licensure afterwards. All right, let's see. Oh, it looks like Shyla. If you want to go ahead and share real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say that you can kind of like like kind of like what Sarah's been saying. I don't want people to feel pigeonholed necessarily by their specialization, for lack of a better word. Like for me, I probably will go into policy social work, so that's been really helpful, but I think a lot of people are exploring and using this opportunity. Another good way to approach grad school is to say, like, let's say you have a lot of experience in policy work, like maybe you've done a lot of political advocacy, macro level social work, and you're like, I really want to explore what clinical social work could be like to kind of build my knowledge and expand my skill sets and my approach. And make this is a great time to do it as a student. Like you have the ability to kind of go into like a practicum site or a class not knowing anything, and that's totally fine. Whereas like at a job, like you would need the resume and the experience and everything. So this is really a great time to kind of branch out and use grad school to kind of supplement like things that you haven't gotten so far experience wise in your career or in academia. And you can also kind of take I like to call it the buffet approach. Like where like I have someone in my policy specialization who his specialization is policy, but his practicum, it's half macro social work. So he does a lot of organizational admin at his site, but the other half of his practicum is clinical, and he does casework there too. So it's, you know, you're getting some rice, and you're getting some sauce, and you're getting some meat, and you're getting some veg. Like you can make your program like that too. I don't want people to feel like you're never going to learn anything about clinical ever in your life if you just do policy, or vice versa.
Exactly, exactly. Moving away from some of like the coursework specific. Oh, sorry, Allison, feel free to share.
Just to really highlight what Shyla is saying, is that like your practicum is, you aren't there to work, you are there to learn. So take advantage of like kind of meeting all three specializations if that's what you're interested in.
Yes, and moving away from some of those like coursework specific questions, we did have some questions about practicums. So, for example, someone was asking about kind of the relationship between one specialization and their practicum and how it might influence your practicum site, right? So, like I was mentioned earlier, right, you start up with that generalist practicum and then you go into well, it's generalist coursework and that practicum, and then you complete specialization specific coursework and a separate practicum placement that's related to your specialization. Um, I when folks kind of introduce themselves at the start, they might have highlighted that or mentioned that. Um, but yes, I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that for folks. Another question as well was, does it matter what specialization I choose if my bachelor's degree was not social work? So in terms of basic like admissions requirements, we don't require students to apply and have that Bachelor of Arts in social work or social welfare. Those that already happen to have that degree usually apply for that advanced standing program, which is about 11 months in duration. But you don't have to come from a social work background to pursue an MSW. Another question, again, kind of quick questions here. Some folks have questions about when practicum begins. That will really depend on the specific program that you're enrolling in. So for example, right, we have the full-time program, we have the part-time program, and advanced standing, and they all look a little bit different in terms of like course sequencing and when you start your practicum. All right, I have another question here. Someone said, doo-doo-doo-doo. Questions about the cohort model among students in the same specialization. Yes, so yes, there are different cohorts of students, correct? Perfect. Let's see here. Sorry, folks,
Can
I'm
I
just,
highlight a question, Sarah?
yes, yes, feel free to. Sorry, I'm just digging through a lot of
No, you're
questions here.
good. There's a really good one in here for Allison. It was of course I just lost it. But it's about, is it harder to become a therapist if you take a path different? Oh, it's for everybody. Different than clinical, and then also maybe Allison too, like could sorry to put you on the spot. I saw a question in here about like the relationship between clinical social work and therapy, because like I feel like it's kind of like a I don't know, like a rectangle is a square, and a square is not a rectangle, or vice versa. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I think that might come back to what I mentioned earlier as to what clinical social work kind of is. It's really that that case management, care coordination, and therapy. I like to think as clinical social work is like it's social work where you're just engaging with people. Therapy is like a subset of that. In my role in my practicum, I am a therapist, an intern therapist, but that is still kind of like I'm not just a therapist. Like there will be situations where I will have to do like some case management for my client, or like managing some care, things like that.
I also just wanted to add, I went ahead and put it in the chat here. We do have some resources on our website that list some elective courses that fall under each specialization, recommended courses to take. And then at the bottom of the pages, you'll also see a sampling of some of the practicum sites that our students might be at. Here at the School of Social Work, we actually have over 600 practicum sites, so quite a few. But that's just kind of a handful or a sampling that you'll see online. All right. Another question here. Let's see here. Okay, let me just go back a little bit.
Sarah, can I share something about my practicum real
Oh,
quick?
yes, yes, please do, please
Okay.
do.
Okay. So part of my practicum, so we do like interact with individuals, with like the youth that needs to that needs help finding housing. And then at the end of the year, we submit like a suggestion to legislation, which I love because it takes like all of the data that we learned from individual practice with people and with the community organizations and the other partnering organizations that are helping the youth, and then we make a suggestion to legislation, which I think is like my brain like gets so happy about that because that's exactly what I wanted to find in social work, something where you're directly, you know, showing to the people making these policies that hey, this is happening to people, like right now in communities. So and the other intern that's at my practicum site is a clinical is clinical, has a clinical specialization, and we talk all the time about like the different facets that we're kind of focusing on, and also in the ways that it's just all the same. So yeah, just wanted to share that, how it all bridges.
All right, and another quick resource I also just want to share with folks real quick. If you go to our YouTube channel, and you'll also see it on our Instagram as well, we just recently published some podcast episodes where we talk about each specialization in more detail. And you'll actually see Shyla featured on them as well with our assistant director, Nyla. All right. Some other kinds of kind of questions here. For example, someone's asking about questions about just like practicum sites. So just kind of like logistical kind of back end information. So once a student is admitted to the program, they decide to come here, they are matched with a field faculty advisor, and they will kind of provide that guidance in terms of, maybe you want to talk to them. Oh, these are my interests. This is what I'm kind of want to do. They might be able to recommend certain sites to you. Once students actually come into the program, they are given access to essentially like an internal facing website that kind of hosts all of those various practicum sites and positions that are available to students. Some of those positions or openings will be specifically for that generalist curriculum, like I mentioned, that you'll start with. And then there will be some that are specifically for when students start their specialization specific practicum. So you'll see the kind of complete directory, if you will, once you're actually in the program. But again, the kind of like small sampling you can find on the website that I linked in the chat. All right. Another quick question again. Sorry, I see some admissions questions here. Just some questions about admissions timeline because we have a lot of folks who have applied that are currently attending today's session. So the vast majority of applicants will be notified in early March. Some students might be notified a little bit earlier than that, some of our advanced standing students, but for the vast majority, we're looking at early March. So no one has received any decisions yet. Let's see here. Yes, and we're getting pretty short on time here. So if you have any last kind of questions, please let us know. Again, please put it in the Q&A. Let's go ahead and see here.
Can I uplift a question, Sarah?
Yes, feel free to.
There's a question in here. Again, I lost it, but about balancing course load, work, practicum. Yeah, if you work, your personal life. I don't know, Faith or Allison, if you wanted to speak to that, like what it's been balancing course load, your practicum, all of that, with just being a human.
I can say that the advanced standing choice is a big choice. And I mean, you're working 3 days a week, and then Thursday, Friday you have classes, and at least for CCIP, they're kind of predetermined, and then you get one elective. And then if you have the capacity to, you can add more electives. I think you get charged by after a certain, you can't add too much essentially, but it's busy, it's really invigorating at the same time, and sometimes you have to switch hats really quickly. But yeah, I mean, and then on top of what Shyla said about like on top of like living, just like make sure you're like connecting with your people. I think that's like the biggest thing. You're gonna get reinvigorated when you connect with your people, for sure.
I'm incredibly privileged in that all I gotta do is just come to school and do my practicum. I don't have a job. I don't have kids. I don't even have a pet. So if you have any of those things, I imagine it is significantly harder to complete this program, but it is doable. I do have peers who do work full time on top of doing their practicum and their course loads. I think, oh, I guess like speaking like a little more as to like practicum wise, because like they know you're in school, and because your class, like your instructors know that you have practicum, for the most part they're trying to be a little lenient and like really integrating both your practicum and like the coursework into itself. That way it's not super overwhelming on you, because again, the emphasis is your learning, not what you're able to do.
All right, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up pretty quickly. Just to kind of wrap things up, our last question that I see here is there any kind of memorable moment or dialogue from your time in the MSW program that you'd like to share with folks? Any
Sorry,
thoughts?
any memorable moment? Is that what you said?
Any memorable moments or any kind of memorable dialogues, things that you learned in a class, maybe?
Yeah, many things. I feel like I'm learning 12,702 things a day, which is great. That is an exact number. I think the biggest thing in policy work, is learning how nuanced it is in terms of building support and who, like where conversations are taking place, I guess, learning how, even though Washington State has a pretty inclusive legislative process in the sense that like you can look up any bill in a very easy way online and you can look up where it's going and where it is in its process and everything, still a lot of people don't know how to do that, even though there's still sources are available. So learning about the accessibility parts. And then I think the other biggest thing for me that's in politics specifically has been not everything is like just Republicans versus Democrats. Like it's within a party, there is a lot of different like diversity in thought and opinion too, within areas of expertise. You might really agree with someone within your party or in another party on one issue, and on another issue you guys totally disagree, or vice versa. So I think understanding that nuance is really has been really helpful in just humanizing people. It's also been refreshing in some ways to see a lot of bipartisan efforts be passed. Also, it feels very like some people are over here and some people over here, and it's just like so far and miles away. And it's a lot of, and sometimes it is. Like I'm not denying that in any way, shape, or form. But there's also a lot of really impactful stuff that is happening that is like bipartisan or that brings a lot of people that like in a stereotypical way are feel like they're not close together, or feel like they don't have common ground if you were just to like look at it in a snapshot or read one article online or something. So I think the nuance of being immersed in this process has been really impactful because I thought I was like, oh yeah, all of us in our one party are gonna get along and we're all gonna think the same. And that's not the case either. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And social workers don't always agree on issues too. I've been learning that there's some policies that heavily impacts the field of social work, and not all social workers agree on which bill is the best way to do that either. So the nuance, the nuance.
I will just add quickly. Well, to go back to the last question super fast, I'm a single mom. If you have kids, if you have like a busy life, you can do it. Like you can do it. You could absolutely do it. And then about what I've learned, what's it called? There were a lot of disagreements. There were some professors that were saying that our cohort didn't have the vibe that they wanted and that we weren't close enough as we should be. And all of us in our cohort, all 30 of us, sat on the floor together in a circle and we just talked. And at the end of the day, the biggest lesson that I want to pass on is that this is your education. Aside from your professors or the other people, like connect with the peers. Don't let like people in this like large institution tell you that you can't create these relationships, that you can't create these lifelong lasting relationships that are going to get you through school and beyond, and any other service social justice work that you choose to do. So yeah.
I just read the full question for the memorable moment or dialogue in the MSW program. All I can say is you should definitely find your community and really emphasize what that is, because you will all find themes about like what the school of social work can improve on, and there will be ways to brainstorm how to address that.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and stop that recording. But thank you all to our panelists. We'll go ahead and we'll wrap up. But thank you all for attending this evening.